So, welcome to another episode of the Jason's Take On podcast. Today, it's just the two of us deep diving into a topic at the heart of business success, and that is what does it mean to be customer centric in 2025 and why it's critical for growth. I'm Jason Whitehead, joining you from sunny Washington, D.C. Beautiful day out here. And I've got my partner in crime, Mr. Noble, over in the UK. Say hello, Jason.
Hello, Jason.
Awesome. In a world that's more competitive than ever, being customer centric is no longer optional, it's essential. And businesses that prioritize their customers' needs and preferences and success are ones that thrive. But what does it truly mean to be customer centric in 2025? And how is this different than this year and years before? We've got rapidly advancing technologies, we've got shifting customer expectations and economic pressures. Leaders need to rethink how they align their strategies to deliver value at every stage of the customer journey. So in this episode, we'll explore why customer centricity is a growth driver and how companies can move beyond lip service to real action. Innovative practices are redefining customer centricity in the years ahead. So a lot to cover today, a lot of exciting things here. Excited about this conversation. So Jason, I'll throw this one over to you. What does customer centricity mean to you in the context of 2025? And how is it different than previous years?
I think this is, as you said, this is such a key topic and something that there's a lot of conversations about. I talk a lot about this in other posts that I do, in talks that I do. And I've always said you'd never get an organization that says, we're not about our customers. That's just silly. But I think
Yep.
we've seen over the last 20 years, and I've said it before, is that we've focused, as particularly in SaaS, we've focused on technology and maybe a bit too far, and the customer's been left behind a little bit. And what we're seeing now is that realization and shift that actually we do need to focus on the customer, and we do need to look at what are we actually doing. We're here to provide value to our customers, for them to be successful and for us to be successful. So I think there is a growing momentum for organizations to be more customer centric and a really big push for it, which is great. I was at an event in London yesterday and there was a talk. So it's the Customer Engagement Summit. The Bupa, so a healthcare provider in the UK globally, did a talk, and they one of their visions is to be the biggest or the most customer-centric healthcare organization. And a lot of their talk and some amazing quotes were all around being customer-centric. And for me, it's particularly when we start looking at what we can do now with AI and how we can be more efficient and get a better use of technology. Customer centricity now and as we go into next year is all about really building and maintaining relationships at the human level, trusted relationships where our customers understand what we deliver. We understand them. They feel what it means to be valued, to feel valued, understood, and to be empowered. And I think it's evolved massively from being a buzzword that perhaps I think we've all used it too much, to being more of a measurable strategy driven by data feedback that can really push for proactive and personalized experiences and services. And it does, it goes way beyond what we've done over the last 2 years, driven by massive shifts in technology, driven by a continued change in customers' expectations. All of us as customers want more. I'm your worst example. Right? I think we all push the bounds
For many things.
and get, but just technology is helping us. We want a seamless experience. And I think it is fundamentally different, and it's so important. And I always say, for me, the real essence of being truly customer centric is when an organization can be agile enough and responsive enough to shift as your customers are changing. And that pace of change is just accelerating. So it is, I think it is such an important thing. And I think there are some fundamental differences as to how it is evolving. Let me ask you, Jason, what do you think, and why do you think being customer centric is now more important for sustainable growth? What shifted to make it be this center that people are looking at as we get growth from?
I think on this one, I'm going to take a more pessimistic view than you. And I think that there's a lot of customers out there who have had good experiences from other companies. And frankly, they're just not willing to put up with crap anymore. So they're realizing like, this is nonsense and I don't need to put up with it. And I may get a better deal somewhere else, or I may even get better financials here, but I will have a better overall experience and outcome going with someone else, and I'm not going to waste my time on things. And I think increasingly people are not going to waste time on things that annoy them, or that it if they find themselves saying it doesn't need to be this way, they're going to move. But I think another area where I'll take a pessimistic view is I've worked with a lot of executives and executive teams, and constantly amazed at how some people, especially the customer success folks, have all drunk the Kool-Aid that this is a strategic priority. We need to be customer centric. We need to do this, and it needs to reflect in everything we do. And I think a lot of folks probably listening to this podcast even agree with that. But when I get talking with people in product or people in finance who they may have a very narrow focus and a bit of blinders on, where they're like, that doesn't apply to us. And they don't necessarily see how their actions impact customer outcomes and the customer experience. Some pretty simple examples, even just working with a product development team, trying to get them to say, we need to adjust how we do releases, because what for you is you want to get release out the door as fast as possible, but there's a lot of lead times that need to happen for other folks to prepare training materials, to prepare the customer, to help the customer figure out how they're going to adopt it, if it's a big change or not. And sometimes the product teams, oh, it's ready, let's just push it out today, without doing the other things that contribute to an experience. And when you talk with some of these leaders, they don't really get it. They're like, or maybe the leader does, but then I hear, oh, my team doesn't fully understand that and I can't get them on board. And that's a problem. And I think for many years that's been allowed. Similarly, I think you see a lot of CROs or CFOs saying, hey, I don't see the value in the financial return in this customer success team that we're investing in. And it's a lot of overhead and these tools and these people. I'm going to cut it, or I'm going to cut a lot of them. And that may make short-term financial sense, maybe not, but it may not make long-term growth sense. And I think there's some disconnects there where people, if your remit is to look at the financials and be very focused, and if you've got investors saying, what do we need to do this quarter and next quarter, you may not be looking at the long-term impacts and long-term growth piece. So I think there's still some big disconnects that need to happen. And I think in 2025, we really need to get those addressed so that everyone, especially heads of other departments, can see the strategic implications of what they're doing. But I don't know, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think you, excuse me, I think you're so right there. And that organizational alignment is fundamental. And customer success, we've always said, and I think it is accepted now, it's not a department or team, nor is
Yeah.
customer centricity.
Right.
And ultimately, what the majority of business is doing is providing services, products to customers. And so the customer is in every single business.
Mhm.
But I think there are multiple reasons why there's different economic pressures, there's financial pressures, why perhaps the customer has been forgotten about. And this is why we need
Mhm.
to shift there. You mentioned in your answer there about if customers have a bad experience, they leave. There was a great quote and backed up
Mhm.
data yesterday at this event where they said after as little as 2 bad experiences, customers will leave an organization. That's a
Mhm.
huge wake up call, because 2 actually, how, if you look at organizations that you've dealt with, 2 bad experiences probably isn't unusual.
Oh yeah.
And there's now, given the marketplace, the competitiveness, there's so many different solutions. And it is, we talked on our last podcast about organizations leaving. If that process to leave is done well and made seamless, people will
Mhm.
leave. So if you provide a bad experience, but you've got to invest, you really have to invest. And it has to come from the founders, from the CEOs. They have to be, yes, we're about the customers.
Mhm.
But those customer centric values then have to align with all of the team goals, the organization goals. And we've got to build customer
Mhm.
centricity into every single team: product, marketing, sales. Maybe you think it's not obvious, but it should be. We're building a product for
Right.
customers. I want customers to use my product. And so that the customer usage and customer getting the value from my product should be obvious. I
Right.
think we're seeing a
I
shift to it being more, but not there just yet.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think one of the hardest things too is it's easy to talk values. It's easy to talk goals. It's even easy to talk metrics. But what's hard for a lot of people to do is say, how do I translate this into day-to-day behaviors, day-to-day actions? And I remember, God, it was about 15 years ago now. I was on a great project over in London, working with a massive team and a massive re-engineering. And one of the things that we did as a project team is we had some of these value statements. We want to be customer centric in everything we do. And then it had in there, which means that done. And then there was like 7 bullets of very specific examples that everyone should be demonstrating on a behavior. So they translated value into observable actions that made it easy to say, did you do this? Did you do that? And it made it easier for people to put it into practice. And it also made it easier during a lessons learned or a strategic review meeting to get everyone together and say, where did we live these values as demonstrated by what we said we want to see? And where did we not? And how do we shift that? And I think a lot of folks don't even go through that simple, it's exhausting. I shouldn't say simple, but powerful process to really say, here's how we're going to know when we're doing it. And here's how we know when we aren't. And here's when we're going to come back and measure our own self and try and learn from it. Because a lot of people skip that learning step, which I think is absolutely critical. So I think that's a big piece of it as well, too, is how to live the values in an observable way.
I think that's fundamental because you can have a vision. You've got
Mhm.
the culture that needs to be enabled where everyone can understand where they are, but there then has to be a system and processes that allow you to meet those values, that vision, and then effectively a series of measurements, enablers. How do we know that we're doing this and when we're doing it? So it's not it's a bold statement to be more customer centric, but there's a process that you
Mhm.
follow to do it. And I think that quite often can be the challenges that organizations don't have they don't see it as a priority. There's other challenges on there, but I think part of our
Yeah.
job as customer success, customer experience leaders is to make sure that there is executive ownership of this vision of being customer centric.
Yep, I tend to agree with that. And I do wonder too if there's some people out there who, especially in the leadership ranks, who don't actually believe that customer centric is required to have exceptional growth or have exceptional sales or revenues. And they may say, we have a great product and that's enough, or we have market dominance. And so we can coast a little bit on that. So I'm not convinced that everyone believes that being customer centric is critical. I think it's nice to have. I think they want to say they are, but I don't think they necessarily view it as essential to
I'd,
their success.
I'd disagree though, because if you've got a great product, what makes a product great? Do we just think it's great? Or where if our product's not working, delivering value, our customers will tell us. But if our product's great, we don't just think it's great. We know it's great. We're getting that
Mhm.
feedback that comes from customers. So we've done the right thing. And I think, again, if we've got a huge market share, it's not by fluke. It's happened because customers are getting value from us. So I think we've achieved being more customer centric. Maybe we're not thinking about it like that. And maybe
Mhm.
that's only the shift that's needed. But we are absolutely, if we've got a big market share, it's because customers are using the product. So I think,
Or it could be we're first to market as well too, and there's not a lot of viable competitors out there. There are some of those products that they've just first to market, they exploded, they got there, and now they're resting on their laurels a little bit. And I just want to make a distinction too between having a great product and what you said earlier, like two bad experiences. The experience isn't necessarily with the product. It could be with your support team. It could be with your sales team. It could be with someone
absolutely.
else. Product alone won't get you there. So you can have a great product and a shit experience because of all the people and processes around it.
I absolutely. And it's when all of this comes together. But I think anything in here, you're having good experiences because we are thinking about the customer, got a good product because we're thinking about that end game. How does how then does our leadership team get this thinking about the customer? What do we need to do to make sure that we're thinking customer first across the organization?
Yeah, that's always a challenge. I think there's a couple things. One, the CEO has to be committed to it and have to internalize it and view it as a practice. If you don't have that, nothing's really going to fly where you're going to be. There may be, I think you need to bring, sometimes you need to help develop that mindset and that behavior set in other leaders. And some of it might be you've got a new leader who's new to being in a leadership position as they've grown in their career. They've taken that jump from director to C level or something of that nature. They may need some coaching, professional development to get them there. You may have some folks who come from a financial or technical mindset who, because of their exposure academically, professionally, what have you, may not have had the wider experiences or thought pieces around. They may need some professional development to help be more customer centric and not just professional development to make them exceptional at what they do in their subject matter areas. So some of that may come together. And I think in some cases you may, or the leader may need to recognize this is not the team to be customer centric. I may have one or two people who they may be very good at what they do. They may be very nice people, or maybe they're just not a fit anyway, but they're never going to internalize customer centricity and they're not going to spread that throughout their departments and their practices. Frankly, we just can't get where I think we need to go with this staff. And sometimes if you want to make change, you need to bring in new people, new personalities, new experiences. But those are a couple of my things. I think you can also embed it into your process flow and even simple things as you're conducting your meetings, have in there a lesson learned phase or once a month, once a quarter, we're going to do a 2 hour review meeting, are we still being customer centric, and bring in a facilitator to ask those tough questions. Because I know several times when I've been brought in as a consultant working with C-level teams, other members of the C team have come to me and said, we're so glad that you've been here because you asked some of the hard questions that a lot of us internally hesitate to ask because we have to live here. I'm like, sure. And as an outsider, you can do that. So those are a couple of my suggestions, but what are your thoughts and what else would you
I
recommend?
love that. That last one I think is so key. And it's also, you need to do periodic team wide coming together and going through not just about this, but what are the challenges? What's working? What's not working? But with a focus on how do we grow? How do we help our customers grow? But doing
Mhm.
it in a neutral environment where you can all get together, you can share, be very transparent internally. But
Yep.
I like the idea of having someone as a facilitator who could ask the right questions really helps guide it. Maybe what you do is facilitator could be someone in the business and you rotate that through different teams to give you a different perspective.
Mhm.
But I like that. But I really do think that ultimately leadership set the tone. That
Yep.
us thinking about the customer has to be from the top. We have to have our founders, our CEOs, our board thinking this. And I think we've got to make sure that our right leaders are spending time with customers, sharing stories, challenges, success stories. When there's a problem, these leaders are contactable. They do respond to customers. That's fundamental. Don't just as the leader pass it on to someone. You set the example, set the tone of what that conversation, you be seen to doing the right thing. And I
Yep.
think you ultimately can help look at resource allocation. To your point, we might need to bring new people in. We might need to change teams. Have we got the right resources, the right initiatives in place, the right investment for doing these things? So I think there is a really broad role that leadership plays in this, but I think it's fundamental in setting that tone as to, yes, we are, whether it's customer centric or customer first,
Yep.
whatever that tone is, you've got to help set that. And I think it's so important.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think one of the things I've observed too is, and this may be hard for some people, is that if you're bringing new people in, that also implies that there's some old people going out. And I've seen there've been a lot of teams where no one likes to have to fire people, but if the people that you have, whether it's personality, skill set, experience, or attitude, isn't what you need, they can quickly become toxic for the rest of the teams, and they can just slow the entire process down. And sometimes you need to make those hard calls. And I was talking with one CEO, and he said every single person he's had to fire, I hate firing people. It's bad for their livelihood. It's everything else. He tries to do it in a way that they remain in contact and remain positive, and many times they do. And he was very good about trying to exiting customers. He tried to exit staff in the right way. But he said every single person he's had to fire, one, they've gone on to bigger and better things where they were happier and many times making more money than what he offered them. And two, he wished he had done it months before he did and sooner. And I think there's a real hesitation to say, I see a problem with my team. What's the right amount to invest in them and try and develop them along versus saying, this is going in a different direction than the skill set and personality. And if they were interviewing for this position today, I would not hire them for it today. And I think sometimes you need to be realistic that you're not always doing the right thing by someone else who may be saying, I know I need to move on. I need to look at this, but I should wait. So give them some runway, make it easy for them to exit. But sometimes that's the right thing. Um, and to that point too, a lot of people are like, oh, I just hate having these difficult conversations or they're afraid of them or these other things. And I used to be that way as well too. And one of the things I realized, my wife is a very direct person and she's very aggressive. And I realized that a lot of times I would push off having the difficult conversations and I was always relieved when they were over. And then I realized through a variety of actions that there are no difficult conversations once you become comfortable having a direct conversation. And then it's just a direct conversation and it's much easier. So what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's being able to have those conversations internally with customers, I think is so important. And if people aren't doing the right thing, you need to course correct.
Mhm.
Understand why, understand what's happened here. Why hasn't this worked? Is it processes that don't exist, are broken? Are there some other motivations here that are impacting you? You need to think about it. And I think it's important to get that.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's pivot a little bit as we're talking about being more customer centric and things that are changing. We've talked a lot about the need and some of the leadership things. How do you see technologies like AI and automation changing it now? And we've seen such an explosion of them over this year. And I think there's still a lot of questions about what we need to do. How to that, but how can we better use technology going forward to be more customer centric?
I think what technology, things like AI will help us do is give us better use of time. Absolutely. I think it helps us
Mhm.
be more efficient. It'll help us scale better. So a lot of the still tasks that we feel we need to be involved in, it's much like technology's always been. It's there to help us and improve how we're working. For me,
Yep.
it's natural evolution, perhaps a very accelerated one of that. So I think it does streamline how we work. It will free up time for more high valued relationship level conversations with customers. And I think what it will also do is allow us to look at efficiency at scale. So
Mhm.
be able to look at real personalization. The number of emails that I'll get, people think they personalized it and it's dear in brackets name. And
Yep.
how have you done that? But I think things like this will continue to improve and it's so important to do. And I think it will allow us that real proactive personalized engagement at scale and personalize not just the name, but the right message. We understand more about the customer. We understand where they
Yep.
are, how they're using our product, how value is being achieved for them with the product. And we can relate those messages and conversations to them. And I think it's so important how analytics plays into this as well. So we can look more at what data can do around this. And we always said, I remember Jay, at the first
Mhm.
conference when you and I met but didn't meet, I know my talk track then was around customer journeys. And there was a big push then for tech customer journeys. And then it's
Mhm.
digital. But my approach, and I think we agree, is that it's about technology enabled customer journeys. And this is an evolution of this. It's using technology in the customer journey at the right point, but now bring the human in when we need to at the right point. And that
Yep.
AI and similar technologies now will allow us to do that better, more efficiently, and more effectively. And we're seeing that. I think the
Mhm.
big challenge we've got is that the pace of change here is nothing we've seen before. And I really believe that. Just it's an exponential change that we're seeing here. We're still figuring out what does AI really mean? How is it going to impact us? And every day you're seeing all these big companies, AI companies introduce new things. So I think it's something that you do start to question your place in business as a human. Yeah, I think that
Absolutely.
was talking to me yesterday about they were having a full on conversation with an AI bot or something. And the bot understood what they needed. It was answering the right way. But at what point for a business is it two AI agents talking to each other? They both understand the business well. Then what does the human do? So I think these are questions that we will need to answer. But
Mhm.
talk with Jay about it. Trust comes in
Yeah.
as well. And I think right now at the human level, there's a lot around trust. Sorry, fluffing a lot there
Mhm.
about conversation, but I think really exciting area. We're going to see it introducing more and more efficiencies. And for now, allowing us to focus and concentrate more on what humans do best, which is about trust and long-term relationships.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think you're spot on with it will save us a lot of time, but I think there's some other things too that we'll slowly see play out. I think one of those related to that is with the expectation that you can do more faster, there's going to be an expectation from customers that you will deliver more faster, whether that's more feature and function, whether that's more content for or user guides or a better digital experience or help, or I should be able to find the right answer very quickly without having to speak to an agent. Your bots and technology and AI should have all this out there for me. When I look at right now, some of the tools that we have and that I've been using to create content, wow, this is, light years faster than what it was. But now people expect that if you don't have this stuff, either you're not savvy enough or there's still something wrong. But I think another positive that will come out of this for a lot of folks is I've seen where a lot of CSMs and a lot of account managers, they're not always sure what to say next in a conversation. They're not always sure how to follow up program. They're not sure how to send these emails or where to even prioritize their work or what to do first. And I've even seen for myself as I go out to some AI bots doing some stuff that I'm not an expert on marketing and sales and those sort of things. I do it and I do it exceptionally. I do it occasionally and I do it well, but I have a partner that can do that much better than I can. But when I put into the AI, the other thing, here's my context of my situation. Here's the three or five things that I'm trying to get achieved from marketing objectives at the same time. What do I do first? What are the pros and cons? What do I do second? And then help me build that content to do it. It came through with an answer like, don't do this because you may confuse people right off. Do this first, do that first. And sometimes it echoed what I was thinking. Sometimes it had it in a different context, but it gave me a little bit more confidence. Okay, I thought that was right. Here's enough to think about. Yeah, this is good enough. Let me just go forward. So I think it does give people that ability to stop questioning themselves. Um,
What do you
you know,
think? Well, I say, what do you
mm,
think some of the big challenges are? If we want to be more customer focused, what are some of the challenges and even pitfalls with it? What are the things that that stand in our way of doing this?
ooh, that's a good one. One of the pitfalls, though, I think, is finding that right mix of customer centric and giving the customer exceptional white glove, wonderful experience versus being able to draw those boundaries of this is where it profitability decreases. This is where the customer, because if we have different pricing tiers for our services, I'm blurring the line between why you get this versus you get that. And now the customer is expecting it for free. They're not going to pay for it going forward. So I think there's some real challenges there of holding that line of customer centricity, but not customer centric at all costs, and trying to get that straight, which I think is going to be a real challenge for a lot of folks.
I think you're right there. And that for me is what we don't mean by customer centric is first class treatment. It's not putting every passenger in the front of the plane. You've got to balance it. Everyone would like that. Of course they would, but everyone's not willing to pay for that. And it's not the
Mhm.
value or expectation everyone's got. So that that white glove treatment for everybody can't be the way to do it. And to our point, we can't replace that with technology. So you've got to get the balance right. But I think it also
Yeah.
goes to the essence of what a lot of customer success is all about. What are our customers' expectations? What are the outcomes they want? And how do they
Yeah.
want to receive them? They
Mhm.
might not want that white glove treatment. They might not have time for that. They just want the product to deliver the value it should be doing. And I think
Mhm.
that's really fundamental to understanding that. I think what it brings into play is we need to understand our customers even better to really be customer centric. We need
Yeah.
to understand 'cause that's across the whole business. So again, that starts from that full customer journey, from the moment we start engaging with our customers until they renew or leave, really understand them, understand their challenges, what value do they need, and how are we helping them on their own goals to be successful? So that organizational wide understanding is fundamental to it as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think one of the things I love that you talk about is customer centricity as a growth strategy. And I think some people forget, yeah, as a growth strategy, just customer centricity at all costs for all things. And if you're giving everything away, you're not growing. And it's a welfare project. Then it's altruism. And that's great. But that's not what we're talking about in the B2B world. It is as a
Right.
growth strategy.
You're right. And I don't think any business is. You've
Yeah.
got to balance it. There are some customers that want that, but they will pay for it because they're getting the right value for it. But it is customer centricity done right and when done right for each customer who wants it probably differently at the right cost is absolutely a growth strategy. We want our customers to be successful. We want them to tell others about us. And it all comes together, but it's a journey to get there as well.
It is. And I think we've talked about this many times. It is about managing expectations and delivering what's reasonable and reliable against those. And sometimes you have to set the expectation of that's outside of what we can do at this price point and just making sure it's there.
How do we, let me ask another question for you, Jason. How do we empower our teams to make the right decisions that put the customer first while balancing this? We can't give everybody that white glove treatment. So how do you as a leader, as a business, make sure your teams are empowered to make the right decisions?
Wow, that's a good one. I think it comes back to what I was talking about before. Clear guidance, guidance on boundaries and guardrails. This is what we can do. This is what we cannot do. This is as far as we go. Here's what above and beyond looks like. Here's what you can do on your own without having to come back for further assistance or approval kind of things. I think some of that can help aligning metrics and goals towards the outcomes that we want and those behaviors. But I think also part of that is that constant learning loop and being able to come in and say, okay, this is what we did wrong, or say in the short term, did we solve the customer's issue? Did we give a great experience? But how does that also play into long-term growth? Do they now have an expectation? Did we just kick the can down the road or make it a little bit harder? So I think those are some of the things. But what about you? What thoughts do you have on how to do that?
I think that fundamentally is key. Those guardrails and processes, you have to communicate them. They have to exist. And I think another thing that I heard yesterday at this conference, that I thought was phenomenal, was when you see the right behavior acknowledge it internally. So when someone on your
Yep.
team does the right thing, however big or small it is, acknowledge it and share it. And I think that's really important.
Mhm. I love that. And I think there's not enough of that. And to that end too, when you see someone doing the right thing, telling to others, this is what good looks like.
Yep.
This is go to this person. One client I worked with, they were very much of the mindset of we praise publicly, but we correct privately. And I get that. But I think you have to draw that as we praise publicly, we need to learn together, which means sometimes we learn from our mistakes and we want everyone to see, oh, this is not the right way, or this used to be the right way. Now it's the other thing. And then I think it's if it is the correct privately, then that has to be about specific behaviors, attitudes, or actions for
Yep.
an individual that's outside of a learning loop. And I think some people, some leaders get really concerned of, oh, we can't have a conversation of what did we do wrong? What did we do better? And they forget that when you skip that crucial step, you're not putting in those boundaries, you're not putting the guardrails, you're not helping people understand good from bad. So you've got to do that, learn together, even if the learning is hard.
To your point, I mean, on that, and you said this earlier, but the kind of teams getting together, almost like for a retrospective after
Mhm.
something has happened and doing that at regular intervals. And for to make it a safe environment, what did we do that went
Yeah,
wrong as a team and acknowledge it? And things do go wrong. We all know
sure.
things go right, acknowledge that, but equally, what went wrong? Why did it do wrong? And what are we doing to change that so it doesn't happen again? I think it's so important, but you need to make it a safe environment that you don't feel afraid when things go wrong, and you can
Mhm.
share this and you can learn from it.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. So I think this has been a good discussion. I hope we've given folks some things to think about and would love to have everyone have this very successful 2025 and become even more customer centric, knowing that there's always some challenges out there. There's going to be some mistakes. There's going to be a lot to learn, and it's going to happen very quickly with the pace of tools and change and all that great stuff. We always like to leave our episodes with a bold challenge question. So the one that we'll leave for our audience today is what bold actions can you take today to put your customers at the center of your business strategy for 2025? Whether it's reevaluating metrics, investing in new tools, or making structural changes, identify one step you can implement right away to drive customer centric growth in 2025.
That's huge. And I think there's so much that you can do from that. And I like for me, I talk a lot about being customer centric, and I do think it is fundamental, but I love that as a big question. I think as team members, as leaders, there are small changes that we can make that will help us do this. I think this has been a really cool conversation, Jason. I think it is going into next year. It's exciting. We're going to see an accelerated pace of change. So to make sure we're still thinking about the customer with technology taking an even faster technology change and evolution. It's really exciting.
Awesome. Great. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We hope you will join us for another episode of the Jason's Take On and have a great day.
Thanks, guys.